I'm Rebecca Ahn with Money and Tech here at Coin Congress in San Francisco, and I'm here with David Johnston, Managing Director of the Decentralized Applications Fund. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing great. It's been a fun conference so far.
Has it been going well for you here at Coin Congress?
Yeah, got a chance to talk on the 2.0 panel, which is sort of my big interest, all these decentralized technologies.
So can you just give me a brief overview of what Bitcoin 2.0 is?
Sure. I typically distinguish between Bitcoin 1.0 being exchanges or merchant services, things to do with Bitcoin as a payment or as a currency. Whereas Bitcoin 2.0 or Crypto 2.0 has more to do with using the Bitcoin model and leveraging the cryptographic technology to apply to other applications. So made safe for storage, Ethereum for contracts and compute. All of these projects are popping up that are using the Bitcoin model, that they're open source and they have their own token, they're decentralized in their data storage, and they have a consensus mechanism, but they're not really anything to do with payments. So it's using the model for something else.
So what do you see as the most exciting opportunity with Bitcoin 2.0 that you've seen come out recently?
Well, Ethereum just launched yesterday, which is really exciting. They're on their 5th version of the proof of concept. They've done a lot of incredible work around how to reward people for running these contracts. And so it's exciting to see that come into fruition and moving towards the mainnet in the coming months. So that's probably one of the coolest things. I'm really interested in infrastructure. So projects that are really building the underlying platforms that people will build other things on top of. So when I talked about Made Safe, the idea that I have a decentralized way of storing data, I can build so many cool applications with that, right? Storage, for example, just came out recently, storj.io, and they're almost like a decentralized Dropbox, and they're backend agnostic using Made Safe or other solutions to store the data, and they are the user interface. So we're starting to see just the inkling of these new applications that are getting built on top of these lower level platforms.
Right. I've heard of MadeSafe as described as Internet 2.0, so it's essentially sounds like what you're describing. Are any of these companies ones you're investing in with the Decentralized Applications Fund?
Sure. Our mandate is specifically for open source technologies that have their own token. We don't do any traditional startups. We don't invest in the company. We only participate in purchasing the token, either as part of the crowd sale or afterwards. I want to own a piece of the underlying protocol, right? I want to take a stake in HTTP, right? And that's one of the things I said on the panel today, is I think the idea of building a startup as the way that you build technology will decline over time as people see they can build something that's both open source and incentivized. Vitalik made a really good point in the panel about that, is for the first time we can now have both. You don't have to have just volunteers. You can have something that's incentivized, but still open to everybody.
Right, and speaking of incentivization, when you talk about these coins being a means of providing that for participants, how exactly do coins materialize for investors, for participants, as equity, as an investment in the company? How do they become redeemable? Because you could create a coin for anything, and the value of it really only matters in terms of how you can exchange it for other things that are deemed of value to that person. So how does that exactly work?
So it's particular to each application. And I encourage people to really think hard about the model, because not everything makes sense as a token. There's plenty of projects where it doesn't make a technical or economic impact on how they run their program. But let's take MadeSafe, for example. They've got a very different consensus mechanism where they're trying to prove that a node has added storage to the network. And so using their consensus model, they can reward people directly based on the value that they add to the system. So theirs is a tokenized model where it has technical advantages to rewarding somebody using this token because they can do it within their own system. And so if you're in that type of situation where it makes sense from a technical perspective, it may be very advantageous to use a token. If you're in a position where there's not technical advantages or it can't be clearly tied to the benefits of the application, ultimately the economics are based on, just as they are with Bitcoin, you'll have a fixed amount of these tokens, But if you can build demand for these tokens organically over time, more people wanting to store data, more people wanting to run contracts on Ethereum, more people running to access bandwidth, if you can make that natural connection, then you'll have an organic reason for people to demand the token.
Right, and the higher the demand for the token, the more the value the token has. So what companies have you invested in so far?
We'll probably participate in Ethereum. We're involved in the MadeSafe crowd sale, storage, API network, Swarm. We've made about 10 participations so far, but it's worth understanding that these are really different vehicles than traditional equity. With traditional equity, you're expecting revenue, you're expecting dividends, you're expecting all these things where they don't really exist in these decentralized applications. And so when people think about participating, people often ask me, well, how do you make any money if there aren't revenues or aren't dividends? And the answer I say is, well, how did the guys that bought Bitcoin when it was $1 make money? They bought it by taking it when the value was much lower, and then holding it until the value had increased over time. And you're making a decision that says there'll be more adoption over time. And it couldn't go the reverse. It's just like any new technology. Some will succeed and some will fail. And so if there isn't demand for the token, then it won't have value over time. So there's no guarantee in this model that you're going to buy into something that is going to be worth more in the future. It really is based on the adoption. And the cool thing, though, is all of a sudden you become an advocate. Everybody that buys Bitcoin becomes a Bitcoin entrepreneur and a Bitcoin evangelist because they have some skin in the game and they want it to succeed. So that's a really cool model that you can let the crowd participate in these type of events and really add to them.
How do you think, as regulation conversations progress, we're entering a bit of a fuzzy arena here, especially in terms of these companies that are doing more of a crowdfunding-like model, but with equity, with these coins as a percentage of equity in the company. How do you think the SEC is going to start reacting to this?
Well, if you're using a model where it is equity and you're representing it digitally, you still follow under the same rules and regulations. And so you really have to be careful in the way that you structure your project so that you're complying with all the regulations. It's sort of the general rule. If it was illegal to do with cash, it's still illegal to do with Bitcoin. And so if you are talking about a centralized startup that wants to create digital equity, they need to be aware of the rules. They need to definitely get good counsel. We work with Perkins Coie on a lot of our projects. They seem to have really cornered the market in this space as far as representing Bitcoin companies. So definitely encourage people to understand that. But there is an opportunity if you use a model where the token is not associated with dividends or revenue or equity stake, but is only associated with accessing this application, where you can be sort of under almost like a Kickstarter or a gaming type thing where people are pre-buying this product and the only thing they get at the end is this product. So it's important for people to understand the differences between those models and be really careful what they choose. But ultimately, some jurisdictions will be more friendly, some will be less friendly. So it's not as if the New York regulations are global regulations. People will choose to work out of Austin or San Francisco or Hong Kong or Switzerland or Isle of Man. So you can pick different jurisdictions, but if you decide to do that and you are providing a central service, you have to go and take the extra step of making sure you're blocking people from the jurisdiction which you can't serve. So, for instance, Satoshi Dice has to do this. They block all US IPs from accessing their system because they can't fall within the jurisdiction of the United States. So people will develop these best practices over time. I ended up writing a whole white paper on crowd sale best practices, and I encourage everybody to go on GitHub and offer pull requests, offer improvements to it. It's an open source document, so just welcome the community to really participate in that process.
Well, thank you, David, for taking the time to talk with us.
Absolutely. Good talking with you today.
I was David Johnston of the Decentralized Applications Fund, and I'm Rebecca Ahn with Money Tech. Thanks for watching.